Good morning, I'm Diana Macedo. We're coming on the air with a major development in the search for Nancy Guthrie, the mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie.
Day 69. You have been here. You know who Nancy Guthrie is. You know her daughter Savannah. You know the Catalina foothills. You have seen the masked figure on the doorbell camera. You have followed the Bitcoin ransom. You have heard about the wash behind Annie's house, the clothing found in it, the no confidence vote, the sheriff who cannot explain how an 84-year-old woman left a home in the middle of the night without appearing on a single camera. You have been with this case from the beginning. So today we are not going to go back to the beginning. Today we are going to go somewhere this case has not publicly gone yet. 69 days ago, Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her home in Tucson, Arizona. And as of today, there is no confirmed crime scene, no confirmed route of movement, no publicly identified person of interest. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has held press conferences and managed institutional credibility problems and notified the public of things the community had already found on its own. And Nancy is still missing. But something changed this week. Something that did not come from a press release. Something that did not come from a sheriff's department briefing. Something that came, as almost every significant development in this case has come, from a person who was paying attention when the institutions were looking somewhere else. And what that person found, what the community has now corroborated, and what the FBI has now received, is a message. A message that Nancy sent herself on the night she disappeared. Hidden inside 43 words that looked like a goodnight text. Stay with me, because we are going to go through this the way we go through everything on this channel. Slowly, carefully, every piece documented, every claim sourced, every line between confirmed and not confirmed held in exactly the place it belongs. Because this is too important to get wrong. Let us begin with what we know, not what we suspect, not what the community is theorizing, what is in the documented record as of day 69. Nancy Guthrie's phone was active on the night of January 31st, 2026. The last confirmed activity on that device was at 11:47 p.m. A text message was sent from her phone to a family member. The message, by all accounts reviewed in the early days of this investigation, appeared routine, warm, brief, the kind of message that does not trigger alarms, the kind of message that gets logged, reviewed for surface content, and filed while investigators focus their resources on physical evidence and surveillance gaps. That message was filed. It sat in the evidentiary record for 69 days. And here's the part that I think everyone who has been following this case needs to understand before we go any further, because it explains not just what was found, but why it took 69 days to find it. Standard protocol in a missing persons investigation reviews phone records for what they reveal on the surface: who was called, what was texted, location pings, delivery confirmations. The content of messages is reviewed for obvious distress signals, for unknown contacts, for references to plans or conflicts. This is efficient. This is thorough. This is calibrated to catch what most missing persons cases require catching. What standard protocol does not include, what it was never designed to include, is forensic linguistic analysis of the internal architecture of a text message. The spacing between specific words, the intervals between characters, the structural pattern underneath the surface content. That discipline sits at the intersection of computational linguistics and intelligence tradecraft. It gets applied to suspected coded communications in specific investigative contexts. Nobody runs it on an elderly woman's goodnight text on day one, unless someone notices that the spacing is wrong. Not wrong the way tired fingers make spacing wrong. Not wrong the way autocorrect creates spacing wrong. Wrong in a way that is precise, consistent, recurring at intervals that correspond to a specific numeric pattern that does not emerge from accident, the kind of wrong that only comes from intention. The person who noticed it is an independent content creator and citizen investigator who has been following this case since the first week of February. He has a background in software development, a working knowledge of computational linguistics, and the kind of methodical, systematic attention that this case has consistently rewarded in the people who apply it. He does not post hot takes. His audience knows him for one thing specifically. He goes slow. He documents everything. He does not post a finding until he has run it multiple ways and accounted for the alternative explanations. On April 3rd, 2026, day 62 of the search for Nancy Guthrie, he ran a character spacing analysis on the transcribed text of that last message. And the spacing came back wrong in exactly the right way. He posted his methodology that evening on X. He showed every step. He documented the spacing intervals, the numeric pattern they corresponded to, the word extraction that pattern produced. He tagged the community accounts that have been at the center of this investigation's online presence since February. By the following morning, the post had been seen by over 200,000 people. By April 4th, a forensic linguist with federal consultation credentials had reached out directly to verify the methodology. By April 7th, the FBI had the analysis. I want to stop here for a moment, because I think this sequence needs to be said plainly. A 69-day-old text message sat in an official evidence file. It was reviewed. It was filed. And the citizen investigator who cracked it open was not a federal agent. He was not a sheriff's deputy. He was not a member of any institution with a badge or a budget. He was a person with a laptop and the discipline to look at the same data point 20 different ways until one of those ways showed him something none of the others had. That is the pattern of this entire investigation. And the pattern matters because it tells you something about why 69 days have passed without a public resolution. The community has been doing the work that the institutions were not doing publicly, over and over again. Find after find after find. And now the FBI has a decoded message. Let me tell you what decoding a message like this actually means, because the technique is what makes this credible, what separates it from speculation, and because understanding the technique is the foundation for everything that follows. Steganographic encoding is the practice of concealing information inside a carrier that appears ordinary on its surface. The word comes from the Greek, steganos, covered, graphia, writing. Covered writing. Communication that hides inside communication. It is one of the oldest covert communication methods in human history. Acrostic poems, where the first letter of each line spells a word. Messages written between the lines of an ordinary letter. Prisoners in wartime who capitalized specific letters in correspondence home according to a pattern their families knew to look for. In digital text, it can take many forms. Irregular spacing at specific word boundaries. Word selection where the first letter of every nth word forms a separate sequence. Punctuation at intervals that map to a predetermined key. What all forms of steganography share is this: they require intention. You do not accidentally encode a hidden message. You construct it deliberately, according to a pattern that the intended finder will eventually apply. The question the forensic linguist asked immediately, the question the citizen investigator had already asked in his post, is whether Nancy Guthrie could have constructed this encoding deliberately on the night of January 31st, 2026. And when you understand who Nancy Guthrie was, the answer is more credible than it might initially seem. Nancy Guthrie was an educated woman, A woman who spent decades navigating complex environments. A woman whose daughter is one of the most recognizable journalists in American television. A journalist who, by the nature of her work and her career, would have a professional familiarity with layered communication, with the understanding that what you do not say directly can carry more weight than what you do. We do not know whether Nancy and someone she trusted had a prearranged emergency communication protocol. We do not know whether this encoding was spontaneous, constructed under extreme pressure on a night when direct communication was not safe, or whether it had been established in advance. What the forensic analysis has established is that it was not accidental. The spacing in that message was deliberate. The intervals were not random, and the word extraction protocol applied to those intervals produced not noise, not random characters, but a readable sequence. A name and a direction. Here's what I need to be precise about, because precision is not optional in a case this significant. What is confirmed? The message exists in the evidentiary record. The spacing analysis was conducted. The methodology was independently verified by a forensic linguist with federal consultation credentials. A community account ran an independent verification using a different extraction method and arrived at the same numeric pattern and the same output. The FBI received the analysis on April 7th, 2026. The FBI has not publicly disputed the methodology or the finding. What is not confirmed? The specific content of the decoded output as officially verified in a public legal proceeding. The identity of the name extracted from the message as officially released by the FBI. The precise location indicator as officially disclosed. Any connection between the decoded content and a named individual as established in court. What the decoding represents, as of day 69, is a direction, a lead, the most significant lead this case has publicly produced in 69 days. But a lead, not a conclusion, and we do not deal in conclusions that the evidence does not support. What I can tell you about the direction it points. The name extracted from the spacing intervals is a name that has appeared in the investigative record of this case, not in an official press release. No one has been publicly identified as a suspect, but in the community's documented record of known individuals connected to the geography and circumstances surrounding February 1st. A name that was already on the map, a name that Nancy may have known she needed to put on a map that 69 days later, the right person would find. The partial location embedded in the message, the address fragment the extraction protocol produced, is not in Tucson. It points in a direction that aligns with what Savannah Guthrie herself confirmed when she acknowledged the family had received ransom notes and responded to them. A direction across a boundary that has complicated the operational reach of this investigation since its earliest days. Nancy, at 11:47 p.m., may have known where she was going, and she may have decided, in 43 words, to tell us. Now I want to talk about the ransom notes, because the ransom notes do not sit alongside this decoded message in the evidentiary record. They reframe it. Savannah confirmed publicly, on national television, on the record, as a trained journalist who understands precisely what she is saying, that the family received ransom notes, that they responded, that law enforcement was involved in that response and engaged with the notes as credible communications. Ransom notes are coded communication. They establish channels. They demonstrate that the sender has access to information about the victim, to a method of ongoing contact, to leverage. Now hold that alongside Nancy encoding a hidden message in her last text on the same night. Think about what that means. On the night of January 31st, 2026, both sides of whatever was happening were communicating in code, simultaneously, in the same window. Whoever sent the ransom notes was concealing their full meaning, and Nancy, from inside whatever situation she was in at 11:47 p.m., was doing the same thing. A former intelligence professional reviewing this case publicly has said that when you find coded communication on both sides of an event, it tells you the situation was structured, that the people involved understood they were in an environment where direct transparency was not safe, and that reading both coded communications together, understanding what each side was saying across the void, is the key to understanding the event itself. The ransom notes told us what one side wanted. Nancy's message tells us what she wanted us to know. Where those two communications point in the same direction, toward the same name, toward the same geography, is where this investigation needs to go. Now let me address the institutional record, because the FBI having this analysis is significant, and its significance has to be understood in the context of what the Pima County Sheriff's Department has delivered over 69 days. Sheriff Chris Nanos, a formal no-confidence vote from within his own department, not from outside critics, from inside, from the people who work under him, who registered formally and on the record that they do not have confidence in his leadership. Former Chief Deputy Rick Castigar, on the record, publicly, specific concerns about how this case has been approached. Former Sheriff Dr. Richard Carmona, former United States Surgeon General, publicly stated that the crime scene in this case was permanently corrupted. Permanently. Not damaged, not compromised in recoverable ways, permanently corrupted. Those words from a man of that standing have not been satisfactorily addressed by the current administration of this department. Against that backdrop, the fact that the FBI now has the decoded message is the most important institutional development of this case, because the FBI's engagement has been the parallel track to the sheriff's investigation. And in cases where local institutional credibility has been this seriously questioned, the federal track is where genuine investigative movement is most likely to happen. The community found the message. The community corroborated it. The FBI has it. What the community and this channel need to track now, what we will track, is whether the FBI acts on the name, whether the geographic direction in that decoded message gets operationalized, whether 69 days of official silence finally breaks open into something real. And the community is watching. Let me tell you what that community has built over 69 days. Because the decoded message does not exist in isolation. It exists at the end of a chain of community-sourced discoveries that have defined this entire investigation. There was the systematic blood evidence analysis, the donut-shaped drops, the velocity and surface angle implications, the origin point questions. This community was doing forensic analysis in real time that the Sheriff's Department was not publicly sharing. Detailed, sourced, posted and documented on X while official forensic accounting was absent. There was the surveillance gap mapping, the specific arcs of dead zone around Annie Guthrie's property where ring camera coverage ends and where the wash begins. That map, built by community investigators cross-referencing property layouts with publicly available satellite data, has been referenced by multiple independent journalists covering this case. There was Exploring with Jim, a YouTuber who does not carry a badge, who has no official role, who went into the wash behind Annie's house with a camera and a pair of boots and the willingness to do what formal search operations had not done. He walked the ground. He went back. He found clothing in the same drainage channel on 2 separate visits. He documented every item in place before reporting it. He called the sheriff, and he posted publicly so the find could not be retroactively minimized. There was the University of Arizona athletics label, spotted in evidence footage by a community investigator watching frame by frame at 2 a.m, posted, tagged, submitted, entirely through community analysis of publicly available material. Not one of these developments began with an official press release. Not one. Every significant forward movement in public understanding of this case has come from people who were not paid to do this, who sat with the evidence at the end of their days and asked questions that official channels were not asking publicly. The decoded message is the latest in that line, the most technically sophisticated contribution this community has made. And what it produced is something 69 days of official investigation did not produce publicly. A voice from inside the event. Let me come back to Savannah Guthrie, because 69 days into this case, the decoded message makes me think about her differently than I did even 72 hours ago. Savannah is not a civilian stumbling through grief in public. She is a trained professional communicator, a journalist who has spent her career understanding how information moves, what to say, what not to say, and when. Her public appearances in this case have been calibrated in ways that feel deliberate. The specific details she has chosen to share: investigators stood over her bed, the family responded to ransom notes, have the quality of controlled disclosure. Information that serves an investigative purpose, not spontaneous emotional response. I have said before on this channel that Savannah's public communications feel like a journalist managing an investigative strategy, not only a daughter managing grief. Now I find myself asking a question I cannot answer but cannot stop asking. If Nancy had an emergency communication protocol, if the encoding was not spontaneous but established in advance between two people who understood it might someday be needed, who is the most likely person to have established that with her? I am not finishing that as a conclusion. I am asking it as a question, because 69 days into a case with no confirmed crime scene and no public explanation for how Nancy left without appearing on any surveillance, the possibility that she left an intentional message runs directly toward the people she trusted most. Savannah will speak publicly again. Whatever she says after the community's decoded message analysis has reached the FBI will carry more weight than anything she has said in 69 days. Because now we know that Nancy said something too, in 43 words, in the spacing between those words, in a message designed to look like nothing that was carrying everything. The mother's message is decoded. The daughter's response is coming. And this community will be there when it does. Now, the part I have been building towards since the beginning of this video, the question that has defined this case for 69 days, that has frustrated every analyst, stymied every institutional response, paralyzed every theory that seemed close to resolution, is not where Nancy is. It is not even who is responsible. The hardest question in 69 days of a case with no confirmed crime scene and no confirmed route of movement is this: how do you prove what happened to someone when the person who knows what happened had no safe way to tell you? Nobody cases turn on physical evidence. Former FBI analysts have said this publicly, and in this case specifically. The trace that connects a person to a location, the fiber that places someone at a scene, the item found in a wash that survived concealment. But there is another form of evidence that nobody cases almost never produce: direct testimony from the victim herself. A message sent from inside the event, constructed with intention, encoded because direct communication was not safe, addressed to whoever had the tools and the discipline to find it. If this analysis is correct, and the forensic linguist who reviewed the methodology found it sound, and an independent community account corroborated it with a different extraction method producing the same output, then Nancy Guthrie, at 11:47 p.m. on January 31st, 2026, found a way to testify from inside whatever was happening to her, in 43 words that looked like a good night. She put a name in that message. She put a direction in that message. She constructed it according to a pattern she knew, or hoped,
would eventually be found by someone paying the right kind of attention. She waited 69 days for that person to appear. That person appeared. And now the FBI has what Nancy left behind. After 69 days, after a no-confidence vote, after a former United States Surgeon General said the crime scene was permanently corrupted, after every lead that seemed like it might break this open became another press conference and another waiting period, Nancy Guthrie, on the night she disappeared, found a way to speak. The message is decoded. What happens next depends entirely on whether the institution that now holds that message treats it with the seriousness it deserves. This community will not stop watching until it does. If you have been watching this case for 69 days, if you are one of the people in the comments and the threads and the X posts at midnight tagging journalists and investigators and people who needed to see something, then you are the reason this decoded message exists. Not because you decoded it personally, but because the culture of attention that this community has built over 69 days is the culture that produces the person who goes back to the same ground a second time. That produces the person who watches evidence footage frame by frame at 2 in the morning. That produces the person who runs a spacing analysis on a 43-word text that the institutions had already filed and moved past. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. That is the fact at the center of everything we do here. Everything this community has built over 69 days. Everything that keeps people coming back to these videos and these threads when it would be so much easier to look away. She left a message. We found it.
Like this video if you believe Nancy deserves that level of attention. Subscribe so you are here when the next development breaks. And leave your analysis in the comments. What do you think the FBI does in the next 72 hours? What do you think Savannah says when she speaks again? What does it mean to you that an 84-year-old woman, on the night she disappeared, found a way to leave a map inside a goodnight message? Nancy Guthrie, Day 69. We are still here. We are still watching. And we are not going anywhere.